Hello and welcome to How I Hire, the podcast that taps directly into the best executive hiring advice and insights. I'm Roy Notowitz, founder and CEO of Noto Group. You can learn more about us at notogroup.com. As a go-to firm for purpose-driven companies, we've been lucky to work with some of the world's most inspiring leaders as they've tackled the challenge of building high-performance leadership teams. Now, I'm sitting down with some of these very people to spark a conversation about how to achieve success in hiring and create purposeful leadership for the next generation of companies. Just last month, Jennifer Ingraffea was named CEO of Pendleton Woolen Mills. The 162-year-old company has been led by the Bishop family for generations, and Jennifer is the first woman to serve as CEO. Before joining Pendleton, Jennifer was Chief Product and Merchandising Officer at The North Face, and she's held a number of executive leadership roles at Nike over the course of nearly 2 decades. Jennifer joins me to discuss her new role, the importance of relentless curiosity, and pivotal leadership strategies that pave a clear path to success. Jennifer, thanks for joining me. It's great to have you on the podcast.
It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
I've been looking forward to the conversation.
You and me both.
So let's start with your career journey and a little bit about your leadership philosophy. Can you take us back to the beginning and share what your first spark was as you were thinking about your career and what prompted you to get into this industry and to do what you do?
Yeah, I would love to. I always go back to the very beginning of my life. I grew up in a household where my father's a CPA and my mother is an artist. And so I've always really flexed both sides of my brain, art and the science, and that's followed me through my career. And I would say I grew up thinking I'd be a lawyer. I grew up on the East Coast. I went to law school, and I ended up working in the financial industry in trading. When I was doing that, I always paid attention to the retail sector, and I always felt like the consumer dictated the health of the economy. And I was always really interested in that. And I moved to the West Coast, and I decided it was no fun waking up at 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. to continue doing that. And so I went into the retail training program at Gap Inc. in the late 90s. I thought I was going to go into business development and strategy. And I met them, and they were like, you need to get over to the other side of the business, which is closer to product and merchandising and planning. And so I did that. I felt like I learned from the best there, and kind of my career followed.
So when you reflect on your leadership journey and the work that you've done developing leaders around you, what core beliefs, values, or guiding truths or principles have become part of your playbook?
For me, my leadership philosophy is around 2 key areas. One is stewardship. So I believe the best leaders in the world, the folks I've had the good fortune of working with, either overtly have this belief or they demonstrate it, the belief that you always leave things in a better place than you found them. And I believe that on the tactical level, like if we were to ever do another podcast again, I'd want to make it better than this one. Any meeting needs to be better than the last. Any assortment needs to be better than the last. And any team, I just always believe in getting better every single day on the smallest and the largest scale. And then the other side of my philosophy is curiosity. I don't know that there's an industry that moves as fast as this one. And I think that it is our responsibility as leaders to be curious, to ask good questions. I once had a leader who I reported to really spend time making sure her team asked great questions and for the sake of truly learning. And so if you're relentlessly curious and you believe in stewardship, then those 2 things create an energy and a forward momentum and kind of a rhythm, and you're constantly staying in front. And so I think those 2 things together are really the basis of not only my leadership, but what I look for in high-performing teams.
So where did you pick those up, or where were those things really pronounced the most in the different places that you've worked?
I would say certainly back in the early days of Gap Inc., when I was there was an expectation of curiosity. There was an expectation that you had to do better and be better. And some of it came out of internal competition. Like you wanted your business to be the business that was held up. And so I do think a little healthy internal competition breeds a behavior of wanting to do and be better. And then, I grew up an athlete. I played, sports all the way through college. And so when I went to Nike, that spirit of the competitor's mindset, and athletes inherently are trying to get better and better. And so when you're in an environment of really harnessing the athlete's mindset, everybody around you pushes each other to do and be better every single day. So, I think that mindset is just instilled. And then when you do it enough, it just becomes part of who you are, and it becomes part of who your team becomes.
Yeah. So you've led through cycles of massive consumer and retail evolution. What are one or two things that you can share about navigating those market dynamics that are always changing and shifting consumer behaviors and just intense competition?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. And one of the things that comes to mind always is when a business is under pressure, or a segment of the business or product or some area of what we do is under pressure. There's a tendency to try and get tricky, and there's a tendency to overcomplicate the problem. And a lot of times when businesses or brands are coming up against that pressure, they forget to go back to the fundamentals, the thing that made them uniquely who they are. And I really try and have a beginner's mindset of, if I had to look at this in a very unbiased, almost separate way, what would I see? And whenever you do that, you always want to take it back down to your original foundation and understand, is there something broken that is preventing us from getting out of this vicious cycle or this pressure? And sometimes when you are able to be a leader who can bring people back to the foundation and their fundamentals, things get and become a little bit clearer. And so between that and really trying to look at things with fresh eyes and keep it simple, you can quickly begin to create some momentum out of the problem. A good friend of mine once said in a meeting, simple does not mean easy. To me, that really resonated. Simple means discipline. Simple means focus. Simple means clarity on your purpose, but it doesn't always mean easy. And I think that's the thing in line with the foundation that gets you where you need to go.
That's amazing. I'm thinking about finding time to really zoom out and then zoom back in and wrap your head around what's actually happening and what are those areas of opportunity to bring more clarity or simplicity to that problem. How do you identify those opportunities that you need to dive into and work on?
My process is pretty simple. I use it whether I'm in a company and I go to a new part of it, or I'm going to a brand new brand. For myself, if I stay in the zone of curiosity and stewardship, I first want to set a baseline of, what do I see? What's happening in the business from a financial standpoint, from product health, to how teams are working together, the clarity of an organization. Is there functional clarity on roles and responsibilities? A lot of that, which sounds very foundational, but takes a little bit of time to really wrap your arms around, what is the state of the union? What's really happening today? And in that, you typically find the pockets of the business that really need higher priority help than others. And that time period takes, depending on the size of the business, can take 30 days, 45 days, 60 days. I think the most important thing is you set a limit of that time for yourself, because there's a tendency to just keep wanting to dig. And whenever there's large scale change or a need in the business, you have to create a little bit of movement or wins to clear some space to be able to do the longer term strategies that will make the change enduring. So to me, it's a baseline of learning and a baseline of assessment of what's going on. And then in that, ultimately, you find people in the business that have this huge passion to want to help and, bring them into your calls and learn from them. I think it's really important for leaders to continue to be in a space of learning and understanding from everyone around them. Ideas can come from anywhere. My responsibility is making the assessment and saying, hey, these are the priorities that I see. Let's put time, energy, and resource behind that, and then stage everything else. Then you start to set a strategy of long term. This is how I want to impact the business, the team, the process, and begin to keep a really clear structure for what you can always expect from me is I will always look at business, team, and process. Inside of that, creating priorities and creating that clarity for people and give them the tools to say yes or no to things. And there's nothing worse than being in a business that's either under pressure or has huge opportunity, like momentum that you want to continue to fuel. And your team doesn't have the skills or the tools to say yes or no. And a great strategy can arm them with, I'd love to open up that account or add that product to the line. It just doesn't fit in with our strategy. So we're not going to do that right now. And that's just as important as what we are going to do.
Yeah. So how do you take those opportunities that you identify and set the vision and communicate to help the team really align against that bigger vision or the long-term vision and find the signal through the noise or whatever so that they can make their own decisions and help them prioritize as leaders within the organization? Because I imagine there's a lot of communication that must be happening ongoing.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say the world is so loud right now that I think about this question quite a bit on the daily, sometimes hourly. There's so much going on in your team's lives, in the world, in business, in their jobs, in their team. And another email is not going to cut through. And not to say that email isn't important, but you have to meet people where they're at. So for me, I do a lot of all of those things. So in creating a strategy, I often bring together, working groups from different parts of the company, all different levels, to help inform and set the strategy, for one, because unless people see themselves in it, they're not going to be a part of it. So I do like to have quick wins with smaller, faster teams to be ambassadors, if you will, with everybody around them.
It's infectious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it feels good to be a part of the solution.
Yeah.
And so I always go with that. I think it's important to be transparent on what you're thinking of as a leader, as a teammate. It's the most respectful thing that you can do is be clear. So I do that. I don't over formalize it because I think that's really weird. You wouldn't talk to somebody in a normal day that way. And then I think that there is discipline that comes with communication of repeating yourself so that it's second nature. If I've worked in a team with you, oftentimes you'll see me start a meeting and just say, hey, our 5 most important strategies are X, Y, and Z. This meeting will hit to strategy number 2. Let's get at it. Even if it feels funky at first.
Right, just to get people like, okay, this is what page we're on right now.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, hey, if we're having a line review, remember we need to invest in this side of the business. It's one of our strategic priorities. Let's make sure we over-index on that in this meeting. Those kinds of things.
Clear is kind.
Yes. Brene Brown. I use that line a lot. I think it came out of her Daring Greatly book. Clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And I had somebody I work with, she's a creative director, way back in my past, would always say, being honest with somebody and being clear with somebody is the most respectful thing that you can do. Maybe it was the way she said it. I think about it so much.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And you create a culture where feedback is a gift, it's something that people appreciate.
You have to set that culture of feedback. I think a lot of times people will ask me, how do you give feedback? And I said, well, feedback isn't an event. It's something that happens every day. Like I remember working with somebody and I was giving them feedback after meetings. I was like, oh, we could have done this. We could have done that. Hey, great job doing this in the meeting. And then at the mid-year, they said to me, hey, you never give me feedback. And I said, I literally give it to you every day. But if we want to formalize it, if that's what works for you, thank you for letting me know that. And so making sure people know when you're giving them the feedback is also important.
I imagine if you just did it once a quarter or a mid-year review or something, then when you're giving the feedback, it has so much more weight to it, whereas on a day-to-day basis, you can absorb a lot more over time.
Yeah. Also, if it only happens twice a year, how do you expect your team to learn and develop?
And real time is always the best, I think. When you think about the growth and impact that you've driven across all these major brands, what role has talent played, and what have you learned about hiring and building teams along the way?
I learn every day on this. I think if you make hiring mistakes, if you make team dynamic mistakes, the most important thing to do is let me sit down and figure out where I went wrong or what happened. What did I learn? Some of the highest performing teams I've both been a part of and created, we have fun in the work and people know their role. If you hire folks with too many of the same skills and not complementary skills, whether that's leadership complementary skills, technical skills that are complementary, different career journeys, you really need that to have a dynamic way of working and to keep that curiosity forward motion in. And I believe that people with good intent and high integrity are critical to have on your team. And whenever somebody who could be the smartest person in the room is not easy to work with, it actually brings down the effectiveness of the whole team. I went through an interview myself, not too long ago, not for what I'm doing today, but in something different. And the most senior person in the company asked to meet with me before I started interviewing. And she said, "Hey, I wanted to meet you first because if you and I don't get along, then we really shouldn't go much further than this, And while interesting, the sentiment to me, because I'm always trying to learn, is, you don't bring people in here who can't work together at the highest level, at the most entry, like whatever it is. You don't want a passive atmosphere, but you do want people who have good intent and want to be there. And that, I think, is the starting point of any great team. And then, of course, clarity of your role, all of that. But when I'm hiring, I'm looking for high integrity people who are solution oriented, who can solve anything as long as they just have a chance.
Yeah, that's great. So as you moved up through the ranks in these world-class companies, how did you develop your aptitude for hiring? Were there people that you saw that were really great at it or not great at it? And how did you sort of come up with your own hiring philosophy or process?
I think part of attracting a talent or keeping talent or understanding how to form a team is through the idea of empathy. And I bring up empathy a lot because it's not a soft skill. It's actually a hard skill, in my opinion, or at least that's how I treat it. And the way I define it for myself is, being able to see someone else's perspective and walk a mile in their shoes. And I don't think that you can be effective at what you do as part of a team if I don't understand what the person sitting across the table from me needs. Because if I don't understand that, then I can't be a good partner. And so when I hire, I look for people who seek to understand what their key stakeholders and partners need from them. And can they deliver what the person across from the table will need from them? And so when you look through it with that filter, you will begin to find functional experts. Like, you can't be a functional expert if you don't understand what everyone and your partners need around the table. So that's one of the key hiring capabilities that I look for.
And were there times where you've learned from hiring successes or failures? Like, are there any sort of rules or guidelines that you've created in your mind around what a great leader looks like in your organization, aside from the curiosity and continuous improvement?
One of my first roles in the retail and product world was at Gap Inc. And I remember Mickey Drexler standing on stage and saying, "Hey, we're all leaders in this room, and leaders create the weather." And what I mean by that is, if we tell our teams it's cold outside, they will believe it's cold. If we tell them it's warm and sunny outside, they will prepare for warmth and sun. And it's kind of stayed with me my whole career. Leaders do bring the weather. And there is a dependency on leadership to set the tone and to be in it with their team in a real and honest way. And people are looking to their leaders for honesty and guidance. And so when the business is tough or when the business is great, there's a requirement of leadership to guide their teams through that. For me, the standard of leadership is creating a space for the team to be clear, to know what they're up against, and to create a path through that. And great leaders know how to do that.
That's great. And so you've led large teams of 300 plus people and built functions from scratch and moved around to different organizations. When you're coming into an organization or when you're bringing people in from the outside for your organization, how do you evaluate someone's leadership capability or competencies? What's your approach to really getting to understand how they're going to fit in and what they bring to the table that's complementary?
You know, one of the first steps in hiring or forming a team is giving that person who you want to either move internally or bring in from the outside to be very honest with the lay of the land that you're going to give to them. I've talked to so many people in my career, and I've seen it myself, where the hiring manager or the leader might not really understand what it is you're trying to hire for. What skills are you trying to acquire? If it's a leadership position and you're bringing somebody in from the outside or you're bringing them in from another part of the organization, what does the culture of that team need in their leader? And hire for that. Also be honest about what they're walking into. Hey, you're walking into an incredibly high performing team who've had great success. They're looking to you to take them to the next level. So you need to hire somebody who has the aptitude and the expertise to bring a team like that to the next level. Or you're walking into something where this part of the business has been under pressure in a way that is really uncomfortable. So you need a leader who can come in and restore culture and restore team dynamic and help them pave a path to the future. And so that person you're hiring for needs to not only have business expertise, but real leadership skills on how to bring a team together and trust each other. And so the trust comes in the hiring of how honest were you?
Yeah.
And did you really know what you needed?
Yeah.
And I've hired people who, shoot, I thought I was hiring for this, but really the team needed something different. This is a bad fit. And whenever that happens, you have to call it as soon as possible, because the damage it can do to that person who might just be in the wrong place at the wrong time. You don't want them to sit in it for too long, but you want to give them a chance. The impact of that is the team can fall apart or whatever. So you have to be honest. And that all comes through with transparency. Or, when you make a great hire, celebrate with the team of why that was so great, and talk about it. And I think talking about it also gives up and coming hiring managers ideas on how to hire for themselves when the time comes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what traits or behaviors do you most value in your direct reports, and how do you identify those early in the hiring process?
I think in one of my first roles that was a sizable team that I had to lead, I came across a Harvard Business Review article, which was about authentic leadership before authentic leadership was something everybody said. It was kind of a new idea or concept in that world. And there was the idea that if your life is a house and every room of the house represented something different in your life. So one room is your friends, one room is your job, one room is your hobby. If the walls came down in that house, would every room see you the same?
Wow. Yeah.
And it really had a profound impact on me because I had to ask myself, would they all see maybe a little bit more serious Jenn or fun Jenn, but at the core of it, they saw the same person. And that was really important to me as a human being. So the house idea, it gave me a tool for how to talk about it with my team. So when I go back to the question, I look for people who are real, who are themselves, who want for the better of the whole. They know how to say when they're in trouble. They know how to ask for help. I think some of the best leaders that I've ever worked with know that they're not great at X, Y, and Z,
Right.
and they seek out people who can help them with that and are not afraid at all to say it out loud, because that's a confident person. I know what I don't know. I might not have the full answer, but I know the people who can help me find it. And those people are worth their weight in gold, because I think it was Ed Stack who I first heard say, who's the head of Dick's Sporting Goods, we can't fix a secret. And so leaders have to know how to bring the secrets out on the table to make the business healthy. And that is what I look for in a leadership team or a direct report or any leader at any level, really, is that comfort in saying, I don't know what I don't know, but I know who does. And then the honesty and the trust, because that's a very vulnerable thing to do. The trust in me that I will help them find the answer too, because I also might not know the answer, and I am okay with saying that.
That's great. So at Nike and other companies you worked at, there's a shared sense of purpose that each company typically has. And I'm curious how you go about aligning people behind a common vision and a sense of purpose that's meaningful. I know it's no small feat.
No, it's not easy either, especially when it's missing or needs to be reinstated or whatever stage you're in. I think it goes back to one of our earlier conversations around communication. To me, if there's a missing purpose or a missing unification around the purpose, then it's the job of the leaders to bring the purpose back into the room. And so it might have fallen through back to curiosity and understanding. Where did it go? Why didn't it stay into the culture? Was there something about it that didn't feel right, or that it had the ability to grow some of the great brands that I've worked at and that you've worked at? The purpose is enduring and it's strong enough to live through multiple life cycles. And so sometimes it might disappear because that's not true of a brand, and it needs to be reinstated by the team and driven by leadership. And so to me, it's understanding, dusting it off, understanding what, the original intent or position. Do we all understand the consumer? Do we have a shared view of what the consumer is, who they are, or how we serve them? And then the idea of intent and purpose, is it something we all buy into and we can live in and day out decisions around it? And so, it comes back to talking about it and keeping it front and center until it starts to seep into the culture. And then everything kind of forms around that. So really understanding where it is, how to articulate it, how to bring it in regularly, and having the teams talk about it and trade in it is really the way that purpose seeps in to culture and it becomes bigger than itself. So that's how I think about it.
That's great. That's great. So speaking of Nike, they're known for values. I remember that at least when I was there were 5. It was performance, authenticity, commitment, innovation, and team. But now, of course, it's evolved over the years to all the maxims and all the different things. But in your experience, what were the top competencies that predicted success there, and how do you evaluate for them?
It has evolved quite a bit. There's a couple things that really stand out. You won't be surprised. My first one is learning agility. The industry is changing at such a fast rate. You have to be relentlessly curious on how to be better and do better. And so learning agility is critical. I once sat in an interview where there were 2 of us interviewing a single candidate, and there was just this level of knowing everything in the interview. And the other person I was interviewing with said, "Hey, I'm curious. What do you think you can learn?" And they were really stumped. They didn't have a lot to say. And at the most senior levels, of the brand, there is a humbleness and a willingness to be students. And so learning agility is key. I think that idea of functional excellence is easy. What does that really mean? A passion and purpose for what you do. If you're a product expert, it shines through with how you talk about the industry, how you talk about craftsmanship. If you're curious, that's great. If you have learning agility, that's great. If you're hiring for a highly technical role, you have to be skilled at what you do. You don't have to be perfect. So that command, that language of command and understanding of what you do is critical. And so the word command comes up a lot when I interview, of like a real handle on your function. And then I would say there's always how you think about the foundation of the company and the purpose. So, of course, at Nike, it's sport. And what traits do you have from a culture standpoint, a culture grower, if you will, culture shaper? That goes back to when you sign up and when you want to be a part of something like that. Do you embody the original purpose of the company and what they're trying to get across to the next generation? So to me, I look for all those things.
Yeah. So how do you shape culture? What are some ways to do that?
There's the really simple ways I think that hopefully we all know, and that is showing up.
Leading by example.
Exactly. A lot of the teams that I've been a part of will hear me talk about service to each other, customer service to each other. If I can do something to make your job easier, I will do it. If there's something you can do to make my job easier, I will ask for it. But I look for people who create that care for each other and their teams. And that goes a little bit back to empathy.
I was just going to say.
Right. And, it's customer service. And at the end of the day, at least in the last almost 30 years, I've been in businesses where we are at the end, exchanging product that you put somewhere on your body for money. And you can't treat it like a transaction. You really have to think about what was that emotional connection that got you there. And so if you think about we're serving consumers and we're trading our brand and they're buying into it, then we're serving them. And so you have to think about that with your team, with your partners, your stakeholders. You have to be in a service-oriented mindset and show up and lead that way and be willing to sit in a all-week meeting and be an active participant, because you can't be on a Zoom call and be so distracted that you're not fully present and fully there. And in today's world, being fully present and being willing to have good customer service with your team is half the battle. And so I do think that contributes to culture, really trying to seek to understand. I always have to tell teams, especially if I'm new to them, I will be asking a lot of questions. There are no loaded questions. I'm not going to ask you something I know the answer to, but I will ask a lot of questions, and I want everybody else to do the same.
Yeah. You're creating an environment that helps people embody the brand, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And live it.
That's the hopes.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. So how do you think about legacy? Not in a grandiose way, but in terms of the impact you want to leave on teams and people and organizations at this stage in your career?
I think about that more than I thought I would, probably at the beginning of my career. For me, it is very genuine. I want to leave things in a better place than I found them. If I can help somebody with their career and help support them or brainstorm with them on how to go towards their passion, or I'm sure you've been in a spot where somebody wants to move from one function to the other because they just love it, but they weren't trained in it or whatever. How do you give people the tools to follow their passion? And for me, it's the community that I've been a part of. What I would think to be my legacy of just like, who have I helped? Have I built high-performing teams? How can those people make the next team high-performing team? And if you give folks that skill and it seeps its way out, like if I help you and you help somebody else, to me, that's small scale, but when it adds up, it becomes your legacy. And so I really believe in that. And I think that shows up in any brand I would be a part of. And so that gift is long-term viability of a brand, because you keep passing that legacy of success, support, and achievement. And so that's what I see as what I leave behind.
That's fantastic. It's very similar to how I think about it as well. Like I always say, this is a place where people come to do their best work. And I love to see people do their best work, and they can stay here and thrive, and we can invest in their success. But it's even more cool when I see them go to another place and build their career even further.
Isn't that awesome?
And it's the best thing ever. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
when people call and be like, hey, we haven't talked in a while, but you would never believe where I am today. And I'm like, yes, I would believe it. That's awesome. And I think that's the best.
Yeah. You have a new role now. Very exciting.
Yes.
CEO of Pendleton Woolen Mills. What are you most excited about as you ponder the future and what's next for you in this new role?
Thank you for asking. I'm in week 2. I'm learning a lot. I'm in my listening phase of trying to really understand. And I can't even talk about Pendleton Woolen Mills without talking about the Bishop family. I am so looking forward to learning about 6 generations of craftsmanship and care. And speaking of authenticity, stewardship, it is alive and well.
Epitome of that. Yeah.
Exactly.
They're great humans. Yeah.
They are. The epitome of that is the perfect, way to encapsulate it. And so, I appreciate and am excited about being invited into that legacy. And I take it really seriously. I want to honor the brand by being the best at what I can bring and do in this brand. So, I'm trying to learn, but learn quickly and bring the story of Pendleton to a broader consumer base, to the world through this incredible storytelling of this incredible brand that was started here in the Pacific Northwest. And I do think that the world is interested in the Pacific Northwest. There seems to be a fascination with this in lots of different countries within this country. And when you come to the Pacific Northwest, there are so many cool brands and businesses, natural beauty, way of life, and everything can get better, bigger, stronger, all of those things. But I do think that there's a story to be told from Pendleton to the world. And what I am really excited about is it's really rare to be a part of a brand that people are excited about and cheering you on. When my announcement went out, I can't tell you how many people reached out and wanted to just tell me their story of their favorite Pendleton product, their connection with the brand, a story about the Bishop family. I think you can probably feel how excited I am. And I'm excited to get started. I'm excited to share my learnings. I'm excited for this new role for me personally. Being in this type of role brings me a little bit back to my beginnings of portfolio management, having my hands in a lot of different functions, but bringing my learned skill of strategy, consumer obsession. I also rely heavily on my network and my mentors and getting their advice. And it is humbling for how much has been offered to me, and I want to bring that to the brand. So I'm super excited, and I feel really lucky to be here.
That's fantastic, and you're going to do so great. And,
Thank you.
And I know they went through a very thorough process and talking to a lot of really talented leaders, and I think they made a great choice in hiring you. So
thank you.
I'm excited to see this next chapter for you as well as for them. And we'll have to have you back on the podcast, and I certainly appreciate you too on your second week coming in to take some time to have this conversation with us. Thank you so much. It's been great.
Yeah, it's really fun. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to How I Hire. Visit howihire.com for more details about the show. How I Hire is created by Noda Group Executive Search. To find out more about us, visit nodagroup.com. You can also sign up for our monthly email job alert newsletter there and find additional job search strategy resources as well as more content on hiring. This podcast was produced by Anna McLean. To learn more about her and her team's work, visit aomclean.com.